Hey Tina, how you doing? You all right?
Yeah, good, really good.
Fresh from a week of busyness for the anti-fracking movement courts. Tell us a little bit about
Not
it.
just busyness, it was the tension is different. You know, every week is busy. We've been here, I was checking this morning, it was over 900 days now that we've been fighting at this site. And it's become it's a life. It's not just a protest or an action, it's a life. This is the life we live. And there are peaks and troughs in every family. But in our family of that tribe at the roadside, this week was huge. That was like seeing your children, at risk of incarceration. And I think that we all went through the turmoil the night before what was potentially sentencing, where we thought that when they packed their bags, they might not come home. And that was really emotional and really, really upsetting. And although they didn't go to prison in the end, it's still upsetting that we're found guilty, because that then reinvigorates the activist side of you that says, oh, I'm an activist because of the injustice. And how dare they find these three amazing people guilty? When I'm looking at someone like Boris Johnson becoming Prime Minister, when I'm looking at someone who lies and giggles about it, and when I'm looking at the lies on the side of a bus that car country into, when I'm looking at the growing frack site on the horizon that's going to poison our children in our community, but our three were on trial?
Yeah. It's crazy.
So your emotional roller coaster on a week like this is, A, you love them, they're your people, and B, the very essence of why you're here at all is under threat again. And the fact that he found them guilty is disgusting. Just disgusting. At some point, and at no point, actually, was there mention of the environment or why they do what they do. And how do you ever get things into context?
Really? Is that true? They didn't actually talk about it?
No, you weren't allowed to talk about fracking or the impact on the environment or why you were there. Katrina was the only one who managed to really get that through, which she kept saying, we're not criminals, we're here because we care about the environment.
Yeah.
But even then he was dismissing that, and you could see it in the attitude that he had. So I think that when you boil down justice, it's so compartmentalized now that they look at it like this case in isolation and then take away all of the other circumstances around it. What did you do and was that wrong? Humans are not what did you do and why was that wrong. We're so much more complex than that. So what they did, they were in the way of a truck. Was that wrong? Yeah, of course it was. Why did they do it? Has to come into account to understand why anything happened at all. So yeah, it was a hard week. It was a really hard.
I spoke to Nick, and there were some petty charges there as well, weren't they? I mean, for me, it's imperative to be able to talk about the side of why you're there. It's far different from being in a criminal court. I mean, you should be allowed to sort of explain your position, surely.
Yeah. And the mere fact that the court made it very clear that your opinions were so irrelevant in this room, made justice an irrelevance to us. And that's sad, because this is democracy. And we've lived all our lives and paid our taxes and done our job as citizens. I haven't killed anyone or robbed anyone. I've done what I was expected of me. And now I expect something back from the system to protect my grandchild. And now all I'm getting back is criminalisation. Because you think about it, right? And one of the things I think that most annoys and irks me on every day as an activist is that I am policed. And then I spend a lot of my time in court.
Yeah.
And so consequently, as a human being, I feel like a criminal a lot of the time. And I know I'm not. But most of the time, I'm made to feel like a criminal, like what I'm doing is wrong. And when I think about what I'm actually doing and the reality of that, and it's not a boast, it's the same as every other person I know. We have given up our lives to protect the future. And it's a really hard thing to do. And it's not an easy route to take. But you do it because it's right, it's moral, and it's true. And then to be looking at the courts of justice and treated like a criminal, you think there is such a disconnect, between the truth of what the world is and this masquerade we put on and call it democracy and justice, and it's not true.
So it's got to be varied now. The injunction's got to be varied. Do you think that's a good thing? It's got to be, and it's back in the hands of. It's not in the hands of the people, so to speak, but it's back in the hands of the court and the legal team, which have our interests at heart, don't they?
In theory. So I think that the fact that it's going to be looked at again, and that the paragraphs that INEOS was proved to have overstretched themselves on, that's just too far-reaching, that's too draconian. You can't possibly limit people. But I think what the judge said one thing, when the judge spoke, I think our defence barrister said one thing that was so important that kind of went unheard, which was that an injunction is not the only tool in your box to stop protest. There are already limitless tools in a legal box to stop protest and to make sure it's done legally. An injunction is an addition to that toolbox. And an injunction was not created for this. Injunctions were created for people like me who have a stalker. And I need an injunction to prevent that person coming anywhere near me.
Yeah.
To give the right that I demanded and fought for to a company that needs concerned residents, mothers, fathers, grandpas, to not object to them is a real twist that is not sane, logical, moral, or true. So they are taking the purpose of an injunction, twisting it, giving it to a corporation that can afford to take you through courts in order to make it happen. And that's just sick. It's just a sick, twisted version of the reality that should be and what it actually is when it comes to justice and law and who has control, who has power, who can manipulate the system in order to get those laws through.
Trial by highest bidder.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Just while I've got you here as well, you're coming up to, I know that on a different sort of subject, but the same sort of subject really. It's the women's call. When you've got 100 coming up soon.
Yeah, 10th of July, and I was just writing the invite for it this morning, and I've been kind of putting it off because I was thinking, how do you encapsulate 100 weeks of one of the most amazing things that happens every week? And I know it sounds really dramatic, but you remember when we started the Women's Call for Calm back in 2017, we were at the height of anguish and aggression on that road.
Yeah.
Every single day, and I could feel it in myself, my anger grew. There was no release valve, no let off, no pause for a moment and then start again. It was on top, on top, on top, on top. And that escalation was killing us all. And it was getting too much to be able to face being an activist. Then we decided we'd have this pause, this little tiny pause, 15 minutes of silence.
Yeah.
And it's a bit like I see when I'm stopping my nephews from arguing. So I go into their room and both of them have got themselves trapped in this like turmoil of ego. And until I say, shh, stop it now, you'll separate. They've got themselves to a point where no one could back off. And so I kind of think what we wanted with the Call for Calm every Wednesday was to say, shh.
Bring it down, right down.
It's just quiet it for me.
Yeah.
And I remember on the first or the second one, someone was cutting the hedgerow behind us. And I saw one of the police officers go across and say, shh, they're doing silence. And I loved that respect because that was a very different change to the pieces on the chessboard. And for us, it was a day where we take control. And for a mere 3 hours, it's our road. And we implant on that as women what we want. And what we want is singing, dancing, joy, sharing food, sharing stories, feeling like community and solidarity. And that's what we bring. So we do our 15-minute silence and then we do all the stuff that you're fighting for. It's the life and community that you're fighting for that brings us there. And it's so easy to forget that exists because we're so caught in turmoil and anger and anguish. But until you present, oh, look, this is what we would be doing if we weren't doing this stuff. So, so the 100th one's coming up, and we're begging for everybody to come to that. Everyone who's
When is that?
That's the 10th of July on Preston New Road, PR4, 3PE, and we'll be meeting at 9:30 in the morning, but you're welcome any time throughout the day. We're promising a PIMS tent, because sometimes that's all it takes for you to come.
Right, okay.
So we'll have a PIMS tent.
Will there be cake in that PIMS tent?
There will actually be cake in the PIMS tent too. And we have 2 working groups that will excite people because there's a working group on the PIMS tent, there's a working group on catering. Oh, and then there are working groups on entertainment, music and dancing as well. So it'll be a heck of a day, and it's a day where I think as we face the horrible news that Cuadrilla has applied for the second well to be fracked, I think to put ourselves in a good solid position as the family that we are and this huge movement that we are, to start off at that point would be a nice thing for us all. And I think we all need it. It's been a really rough nearly 1,000 days, and to have a really good kicking off point. So I see the 100 women as that. And I know for me personally, and it's selfish, but it's my solace. Every Wednesday, I take all of the rage I've had for a week, and I put it down and I put it aside. And I swear I start anew.
That's not selfish, that's quite sensible.
Preservation. I think I'd implode with the rage at the injustice that we face. And it looks like it's soft and weak when you put it down, but it's essential because the power of my rage will just eat me up at that injustice.
Well, we're trained in a way to respect the silence, to respect the vigil. So it's a brilliant piece of protest. It's the most powerful piece of protest. I remember being in protests when, after hefty days of being thrown about, we've come out and given a silent protest, and the police or whoever was protesting security come nowhere near us.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Has some power.
that it has the power that every human within the vicinity, no matter which side they're on, will respect it, and that's amazingly strong.
Yeah.
And I love that it is, and I love that it still matters to people, whether you're a cop or a security guard or a site worker. You're still vaguely respecting that calm.
Yes.
That kind of gives me a reason not to despise you to the nth degree. There's some element that still connects us, and that will always be the most important part of healing humanity, is going back to that teeny element that connects us, because that's the only place we agree, and then finding some point to agree on after that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for speaking to us, Tina.
Nice.